powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. The Eagles injury report is out, and they will be without 3 key players for the game tomorrow night. Let's bring Geoff Mosher in to discuss here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Jeff, as just moments ago, the Eagles injury report for the game is out, and listed as out in the game are Reed Blankenship, James Bradbury, and Kenny Gainwell. So let's start with all 3 of them here. First, Blankenship, the safety. They already had questions at safety entering the season, and now you're already down one of your starters, probably your steadiest starter. What to do? How does the safety position move forward with Reed Blankenship out tomorrow night?
Yeah, it's a good question you bring up, because you look at it in a bigger context, right? It's not just Reed Blankenship that you're missing, but you're missing 2 now of maybe your 2 brightest spots on the other than Darius Slay on the back end of your coverage from week 1. Reed Blankenship played well, Nakobe Dean played well against the run. Well, they're both out now, and safety was a tough spot. Justin Evans really struggled at times, did not defend the run very well. Just in general, his awareness not great. So I would assume that you're going to see Sidney Brown poised for a bigger role, perhaps Terrell Edmonds. Now, the Vikings are...
Do they play Edmonds and Evans together, or does Brown replace Blankenship and the other 2 kind of keep their role?
That's a great question, Mike. I think they don't have much of a choice. I mean, they have to play either Evans or Edmonds, and they're facing a team that has a lot of passing weapons and is going to be in a lot of 11 personnel, as opposed to the Patriots, who played a lot of more 12. So the Vikings are going to want to get downfield and spread it out and pass. So you'd kind of want to have Evans out there, because theoretically he's a better cover player. And I think you'd want to have Sidney Brown out there, not necessarily for great one-on-one coverage, but for pursuit, for tackling. He's going to make some mistakes because he's a rookie, but at least he'll be active. He might hit somebody so hard that he causes a fumble. I think you've got to get Sidney Brown in there in some form or fashion. And obviously the Reed Blankenship injury clears that way, but Reed was clearly was their best cover.
Yeah, we're talking with Geoff Mosher here, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. As he mentioned, Reed, their best cover guy at safety on the back end there, and you have a situation where he is now out of the game, and that will transition us into another cover guy who is out for the game, and that is James Bradbury, and we'll get Moshe back here in just a second. James Bradbury also listed as out, and that means somebody, Josh Jobe, is going to get a lot of snaps, who's never really played a lot of snaps in a game before. I think he played like 8 to 9 snaps last week once Bradbury went out with the concussion. But after that, you have a situation where now your back end, you have 2 cover guys that you're down, Reed Blankenship, the safety, and now James Bradbury, who is out on the other side. Let's bring Moshe back into the discussion. You were talking about coverage. Now you also have James Bradbury out as well. I would imagine Josh Jobe gets a high percentage of those snaps. And this is, as you mentioned, this is a team, the Vikings over the years, they have a lot of skill players. Their problem is in other areas up front generally. But you got Josh Jobe and no safeties now that have a lot of cover experience. This could be an interesting matchup now.
Yeah. Josh Jobe has been a nice story of development throughout his 1+ years here, made the team again. And now he's the top backup corner because he had a very consistent camp and showed he deserved that job. But when you're standing across from Justin Jefferson on prime time, it's a whole different story. I'm sure he's a confident kid. In Andrew DeCecco's story on InsideTheBirds.com today, Joe described himself as a tone setter, obviously played a lot of big games at Alabama. I don't think he'll be overwhelmed by the moment, but he's certainly going up against one of the best receiving groups in the NFL. And you could forget, I know they lost 2017 and it looks like that's ugly. Like maybe they didn't score a lot of points. They had 3 turnovers in that game, which speaks to other issues they have, but they did have 369 total yards, and Justin Jefferson had about 180. So
150, by the way. He had 90. Addison,
right.
4 for 61. And then Hawkinson, the tight end. We can kind of map this all together. You lose a safety. You're also down to Kobe Dean. TJ Hawkinson had 9 targets in the game. He could be a guy that finds a lot of room to roam in this game.
Yeah, like I said earlier, you put it in perspective. The Eagles traditionally rush 4. They're not going to blitz a whole lot. So you have 7 guys that you use in coverage, right? And 3 of them are now out. Nakobe Dean is out. James Bradbury is out. Reed Blankenship is out. And all 3 of those are actually pretty decent players. The guys who are not playing decently or you wonder about, they're healthy. So you wonder, Zach Cunningham, Justin Evans are just 2 of them, and then whoever replaces Reed Blankenship will have some question marks to his ability to cover. And then Christian Ellis, I imagine, as the second linebacker now, he had some tackling issues, and he can run, but can he really cover when it comes to, like you said, TJ Hawkinson? So you got a decent number of you got about 5 question marks in your back 7 there, and that's why they really, really need that front 4 to dominate the way they did at times for most of the game against New England. But Mike, even saying that, somehow Mac Jones still came out with 310 yards and 3 touchdowns. And this is now Kirk Cousins and a better set of playmakers.
Yeah, I know that's the thing. Now, we can kind of go a little deeper into this and say their offensive line is a big problem for them. They're going to be missing their center in the game as well, Garrett Bradbury, not that he's great, but their offensive line is generally their problem. You say, wow, they got all these weapons. How come they only scored so-and-so points last week? Well, the Eagles should be able to get a lot of pressure here.
They should. Just like last week, they showed a lot of pressure against a undermanned interior offensive line. Garrett Bradbury is the center of the Vikings. He's out. Coaches aren't stupid, right? Bill Belichick and Bill O'Brien knew that they were going to have issues there, so they designed a quick passing game. They hit their tight ends a lot. Kevin O'Connell's not dumb. However, he also, I don't think, looks at his team and says, I'm built to be a quick passing 2 tight end team. He knows that he's got Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, right? And TJ Hawkinson. He's got guys who can get downfield. So he's got to figure out ways to draw up schemes where he can get Kirk Cousins protected to get the ball downfield. Now, maybe it means keeping an extra guy in. We'll see what they have to do. But I don't think that the Vikings are going to watch Bill O'Brien's tape and say, oh, we'll just do the same thing because they have different personnel. Much like I don't think Brian Flores is going to look at his defense and say, we're going to do what the Patriots did, even though they come from the same school of thought under the Belichick tree, because Brian Flores doesn't have the same personnel that Bill Belichick does.
Right. And then let's go to Gainwell. Gainwell will not play in the game. He is out as well. This is probably the spot they're most equipped to handle, Gainwell being out. I would imagine Penny is active motion. Is Swift now going to the Gainwell role where he gets all the touches, or is this a Swift, Penny, Scott kind of 3-headed monster? How do you see tomorrow night's backfield going? I know this is like a Rubik's Cube here.
Yeah, listen, I'm dying to see how it's going to be because, they didn't accidentally make Rashad Penny inactive week 1. There was a reason that he was inactive. Still not sure 100%, looking kind of into that, but I don't think that you go from inactive to week 1 to playing, say, 60% of the offense in week 2. So I would assume that, of course, DeAndre Swift is going to get an increased role, and it wouldn't surprise me if Boston Scott saw an increased role. I do think Rashad Penny will be active, but I am not of the mindset that he's going to all of a sudden go from inactive to lead ball carrier.
Is that surprising to you, though, that they brought Penny in, a guy who has a checkered history past? No question. His questions were his injuries, not his performance. It's been when he's been on the field, he's been an elite player. So are you surprised that he is healthy and has no role?
I was surprised that he was inactive week 1. There's no doubt about it. I thought the whole training camp and usage of him in some preseason games, everything about how his career so far as an Eagle has been a little bit surprising to me. Didn't see him a whole lot. Now, granted, training camp tends to be passing camp, but, when the pads come on, you do run. There were times I saw him run and look explosive, but it's not like he jumped. Like DeAndre Swift to me jumped out in practice, right? For his ability, it's smooth. We saw it in the preseason game. I can't say that things just jumped out at me watching Rashad Penny. And maybe there's something to that. I know in his career, because he's a big guy, right? He's maybe the weight has been an issue. I have no idea. I'm just kind of trying to speculate on what it is. Does he look a little bigger? Is he not in the best shape because he's had all the injuries? I don't know. But obviously the Eagles did not feel like they needed him week one. And it's hard for me to think that 4 days later they think he's the savior.
All right, Geoff Mosher, Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN, the free mobile app. Geoff Mosher, of course, Inside the Birds podcast. Check out the latest edition there, and we'll let Mosher, of course, let you guys know what else is happening with the guys over at Inside the Birds. We just talked about it. For those of you just tuning in, Reed Blankenship, James Bradbury, and Kenny Gainwell have all been ruled out for the game. Fletcher Cox, by the way, is questionable for the game. That said, defensively, let's go back over there. You're going against a Vikings team that struggled but has a lot of talent. You're missing 3 guys on that. Well, Dean, Bradbury, and Blankenship. Does that concern you that there's 3 starters at positions where you already had questions going in? You didn't have questions about Bradbury and Slay. You had questions about the other guys. Does that change the whole dynamic of your mind's week 2 game?
Well, I think the question changed Sean Desai's mindset going into the game, because week 1, he was very comfortable letting his front 4 rush get after the quarterback, who's an erratic, who looked erratic. And again, the Minnesota Vikings, you saw them last year, right? It was that game that they were down by like 24 points and then just came back and won. They hear and talk about how bad their interior offensive line is. It wasn't very good last year either, and yet there were plenty of times that the Vikings scored points really quickly. So does Sean Desai say, it's all right, I'm just going to keep rushing my front 4, get to him, and every once in a while he'll bust me on one? I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if he dials up a little bit more pressure. We'll see if he comes with a little more 5-man fronts than he did in week 1. I think the big question is, what does Sean Desai feel like he has to do to compensate for these injuries? Because as you and I just both mentioned, these are injuries to the few guys who actually played really well last week. You've now got guys who didn't play well on the field, and then backups who have either also didn't play well or are about to play for the first time.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is you got a lot of unknowns now. So you're going into a game. Josh Jobe, I know that people think, hey, the guy had a good camp, played well in preseason. You're now going up against possibly Justin Jefferson or Adam. This is an offense that is going to try to exploit you, right? Hey, one side, we're going to go after the other guy because this is what we do well. We throw the ball. You also have Hawkinson, as we kind of laid out. Okay, you're down a linebacker and a safety. That's 2 areas where we have guys we think we can exploit. So you try to find the weakness in the defense, and the Eagles now have 2 huge questions going into this game because, but on the flip side of that, Moshe, we do think the Eagles can generate pass rush in this game.
They can. And, this one feels like a game that might be a shootout. I think makers and good quarterbacks, all it takes is, 4 or 5 big plays, right? You can sack Kirk Cousins 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
But if he makes 3 big plays out of, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure that they're doing the calculus on that and saying, yeah, we're going to try to run the ball at times. And then we're going to, just when they think we're going to run, we're going to try to play action a little bit. If we can get one of their safeties into the box and get a 1 high look, because generally the Eagles want to play with 2 safeties high. But if they can do things that draw a safety into the box, or just whenever the Eagles switch, because they don't show the same look every time, if they can check into it and say, that's our chance, let's do it and go for it, I'm sure they'll have some opportunities to do that.
Yeah, Moshe, I want to get your opinion on the Eagles are up 16-0 in the game the other day. And that's a spot for them where you're up 16-0 with my offensive line. That's game, set, match, right? If I'm Brian Johnson, why do you think that up 16-0 that they weren't able to run that game out? That's a formula they used a lot, which is Miles Sanders, 1,296 yards. So I guess my question is, can they not assume that their run game is going to be as productive? Is it because of the running backs, or are we concerned that the offensive line is losing a step?
Well, I did feel like the offensive tackles, Jordan Mailata, after watching the tape, Mailata and Lane Johnson were uncharacteristically inconsistent in pass protection. Got beat on a few inside moves, or sometimes they were just pushed back and had the pocket pinched. I mean, they weren't bad by any stretch of the means, but they're held to a pretty high standard, being two of the best tackles in the league. And sometimes we get so accustomed to seeing that beautiful sort of semicircular or half circular arc around Jalen Hurts because the protection is so great. But there was not consistently all the time great protection. And then there were some times I thought Jalen Hurts thought pressure was there and got out of the pocket, which is sort of 2 years ago, Jalen Hurts. But, credit New England for that. So, yeah, there's a little bit of concern on that. But, like, to your point on being up 16-0, right? They were up 16-0 because they returned an interception for a touchdown. And then on the very next drive, they got a turnover deep in New England territory. Got another touchdown on. So, or a few, I forget how the sequence went. My point was, it's not like they were dominating the Patriots offensively. In fact, right after that, they went 4 consecutive drives of 3 and out, which is really uncharacteristic. So the reason why they couldn't put that game away is because offensively, they were not last year or even very good from start to finish. They made enough plays. They were dominant at times, but just not from top to bottom. And then once the Patriots stopped turning the ball over and just gave themselves whether it was by more quick passing or more going to the tight ends, once they found those holes that they could find in the Eagles' zone defenses, they were able to move the ball a little bit better and get back in.
Yeah. And I'm not sitting here saying I have concern about the offensive line. I guess it was a two-pronged to see where your mind is. You had 1,300 yards from your running back last year, Gainwell the other day. Is that a byproduct that Gainwell's not as good as Sanders, or did the line not create space for Gainwell, I guess, is more what we're looking at here?
I mean, he's not nearly as explosive of a player that Miles Sanders is.
Right.
I think that's been proven. It's funny, we're working on my script for the pregame show. If you look at the average yards per carry and average yards per touch for the careers of all 3 Eagles running backs, not named Boston Scott, you will find that Kenneth Gainwell has the lowest, both lowest career yards per carry, lowest career yards per touch. And yet, he got the most, by far, action in week 1. And the guy who has the highest numbers on those was inactive. Sometimes we get a little bit too obsessed with analytics.
Oh,
this is a case where I look at the analytics and I say, I don't understand what's going on here.
Yeah, I go back to our conversation 10 minutes ago about Penny, man. I mean, to me, if you got Penny delivered to you healthy week 1, he has to be the guy. When you have a healthy Penny and you don't play him, that's egregious.
Again, unless there's something that obviously the coaches know more than we do. They see him every day. Unless there's something that in the tape from practice and the OTAs and training camp that they felt he wasn't the Rashad Penny that they thought they were getting. But then that goes back to the question, then why is he on the 53? You have Trey Sermon, running backs you can get.
Yes, if you kept him, you saw enough to trust him to be on. Like, what does Sirianni say about Nick Morrow? Oh, we liked him. That's why he's a part of our, 68?
69-man roster.
69-man roster. That's why he's here. We trust. If you trust Penny enough to make it, for him not to be one of the best 3 on game day is perplexing to me. As you just said, the guy averages 6 yards a carry, not once, but twice in his career when healthy. If he's healthy and you're not turning around and handing him the ball, I have to scratch my head.
Yeah, and that goes back to your point. Well, why did they have trouble putting the Patriots away in that game? And you wonder, in the fourth quarter, could they have used just 1 or 2 explosive runs that Rashad Penny is known to give you that you have not seen from Kenneth Gainwell throughout his career? Maybe then we're talking about a different game. Games like that, all it takes is 1 or 2 plays to really turn a game around.
Yeah. All right, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. I'll ask you, this is your final appearance on Football at 4 this week. How's the game going tomorrow night? Now you know some injuries here. This might change your outlook.
Oh, yeah, this feels like a Friday Football at 4 where I get to make the prediction for Inside the Birds. So on the podcast that dropped this morning, I predicted a score that I'm going to change a little bit because of the injuries. I'm not going to change. I have the Eagles winning. But I sort of now see more of a shootout type win. I probably a 31-26. We'll go 31-27 maybe.
All right, a lot of fun at Lincoln Financial Field tomorrow night. And right here on 97.3 ESPN, Andrew DeCecco will give us the matchups he's watching tomorrow when he joins us at Football at 4. And check out the Inside the Birds pre- and post-game show on all the social media platforms, YouTube. What time are you going live for a Thursday nighter?
5:00 p.m., my friend.
5 p.m., the Inside the Birds pregame show on their social media YouTube platforms, Facebook and Twitter. So check that out.
Yeah, by the way, tonight, real quick, we debut the Inside the Tape with Greg Cosell and Clay Harbor. They're going to do some tape breakdown from week one and kind of parlay that into tomorrow night's game and what they're expecting. It should be a great show.
Clay Harbor, really good. Good addition to the platform there for you guys. Good job. And tomorrow, DeCecco, Friday, Kaplan to recap the Eagles and the Vikings. Geoff Mosher, everybody. Appreciate you, pal.
All right, Mike. Take care.
All right, Geoff Mosher here on the Sports Bash. That's Football at 4.